So many of you may think that the world is coming to an end soon, but there's a lot of data that actually the world is getting better. And even if you think the world is going to pot, I want you to consider the case that actually things really are looking up, even if they seem bad today. I've stolen most of the ideas I'm going to talk about tonight from books I've read, notably The Better Angels of Our Nature by a guy named Steven Pinker. There are a lot of supporters of these ideas, including guys you've heard of, like Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Bill Gates. In fact, Gates called Steven Pinker's book the most inspiring book I've ever read. To appreciate these writers' arguments, you have to take a really long view, because humans have existed for hundreds of thousands of years, but we've only had tools for about 20,000 years, cities for 8,000, and the US is just 240 years old. The trends we're discussing are all hundreds and thousands of years long. Over those thousands of years, humans have been pretty awful, but the influences of our society and customs, our institutions, our technology, and most importantly, our interconnectedness are making us better people. And increasingly, they're winning out against the fear, anger, and greed that drive us to do really nasty things. Let's go back about 11,000 years or so. Based on paleontological evidence, ancient humans died by violence at an amazing rate, estimated at somewhere between 25 and 30%. This guy, poor guy, for example, had his head bashed in with a club. While things got better over the next 11,000 years, humans were still pretty nasty. In the Middle Ages, we had some horribly inventive ways of torturing people. Worse, some of these tortures were actually conducted in public as a form of entertainment, as a way to show how much power the people who were in charge really had. And this nasty human behavior was legal in the US until about 150 years ago. But it's also a great example of how the human mind can do really terrible things. Because while the motivation for enslaving other human beings is based on fear and greed, a lot of effort went into rationalizing the practice and making it respectable. To see how far we come, consider murder. We just kill each other a lot less often than we used to. Although you can't really graph it because the data is so spotty, the trend actually goes back about 12,000 years. Today, the average person's odds of being murdered in a lifetime are less than 0.5%. And the improvements in human lives go beyond murder. Measured by poverty, education, democracy, and health measures, the world is getting better. Before you object, I know that better doesn't mean good. There are still too many people who live in poverty, are still illiterate, and die too soon from disease. But better is better. To make the world a better place, we need positive influences that come mostly from other people. Let's start with trade. Humans have been trading with each other for thousands of years, and that trade can mean that we have a stake in the well-being of the people we trade with, even if it's just trading desserts with Susie at lunchtime. Another influence is the growth of human community. We now live in the age of the nation state, where about 196 sovereign governments maintain law and order pretty much everywhere on the planet. And even in countries we consider cruel and repressive, murder rates are actually lower because there's someone in charge to maintain a rule of law. Around the time of the Enlightenment, people in the West started to adopt manners, which Steven Pinker calls the civilizing process. It became fashionable to be a person of refinement. If you think rudeness is people reading their cell phone at the table, well, just be glad they don't urinate in public like they used to. A fourth influence comes from literature, TV, and movies. One of the ways we've justified being cruel to other people is to treat them as less than human, as subhuman. But books and films help us put ourselves in the place of people we don't know and have empathy for strangers who live in places we've never been. Besides the influences that push us to be nicer, it helps to be comfortable. How many of you have been grouchy and mean to other people because you got a lousy night's sleep? Now imagine sleeping in the 17th century on a web of ropes or a bed of hay without air conditioning, but with plenty of critters to keep you up at night. Societies protect the things they value. When life was nasty, brutish, and short, human life was cheap. Now that people live much longer, they value life that much more. After all, if you die at age 30, it's a bigger tragedy if you expect to live to 80 than if the normal life expectancy is 35. Another factor improving human life is the rise of female leaders. More women in charge means more effort to prevent rape, spousal abuse, and other violence toward half of the human race, just as having racial diversity in government helps to protect minorities. And some people argue that women are less likely to go to war than men. One reason I think progress will continue is that it's now cool to save the world. Thanks to Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, some of the world's richest people have pledged huge fortunes to charity. In Elon Musk's world, our electric cars will be powered by solar panels. Another trend driving human progress is urbanization. The density of cities mean people work harder to get along, and people who live in cities are generally healthier and happier. If you don't believe me, think about this. By 2050, over 70% of the world's people will be urban, and that's mostly from migration, so they're voting with their feet. The last factor I have time for is globalization. Globalization increased trade, teaches us other cultures, spreads literature, and improves our standard of living. More importantly, it connects us. I've worked with people in 30 countries around the world, and I don't want to war with any of them. I hope you see the glass is half full, and that your connectedness here at PechaKucha will help us fill it to the top. To quote Bill Gates, if you think the world is getting better, you want to spread that progress. It doesn't mean you ignore the serious problems you face. It just means you believe they can be solved. It's an amazing time to be alive. I hope you make the best of it. Thank you.